Hey, folks. There's a strange comfort in knowing that one of the most powerful men in American history spent many of his nights staring at the ceiling, worried, tired, unsure if he was making the right choice. Tonight, we are not meeting the statue. We are not meeting the marble face carved into memory. We are meeting the tall, awkward, quietly funny man who sometimes felt completely lost and still kept going. And the story begins in a wooden cabin that did not look like destiny at all. So go ahead, dim the lights, let the room soften around you. Maybe pull a blanket closer. This is not a loud war story. This is a slow walk through a long life. All right, get comfortable, because we're starting in Kentucky, year 1809. And if you're picturing some grand entrance music, you can stop. There is no orchestra, there is mud, there is wind, and there is a small log cabin that looks like it was built someone who had seen a house once from far away. Inside that cabin, a baby is born. His name is Abraham. He will grow up to be called Honest Abe, the great emancipator, savior of the Union. But right now, he is just a baby with very long limbs and absolutely no idea that history has plans for him. And let's be honest, if destiny had a checklist, this cabin would not make the cut. The floor is dirt, the winters are cold, books are rare, and money? Money is more of a rumor than a reality. His father, Thomas Lincoln, is a hard-working man, practical, not sentimental. The kind of man who believes emotions are something you fix by chopping wood. His mother, Nancy, is softer. She reads when she can. She tells stories. She sees something thoughtful in her quiet son. Young Abraham does not talk much. He listens. He watches. And he grows very quickly. By the time he is a teenager, he is so tall that doors begin to feel like mild suggestions rather than actual passageways. 6'4" in the early 1800s, which basically makes him a human lamppost. Now here's the thing about Abraham. He loves books. He will walk miles to borrow one. He will read by firelight until his eyes sting. He will copy entire passages by hand because paper is scarce. This is not dramatic reading with thunder outside. It is quiet. It is steady. A tall boy sitting by a weak fire, reading slowly. And in those pages, something forms. A mind that likes logic. A mind that likes fairness. A mind that does not like bullies. And America, at this time, has quite a few bullies. But we are getting ahead of ourselves. Let's stay small. Stay slow. Abraham's childhood is not glamorous. It is full of labor. Farming, fencing, splitting rails. He becomes strong, lean, quietly observant. And then something happens that leaves a mark far deeper than poverty. His mother dies when he is just 9 years old. Milk sickness, a disease caused by cows eating poisonous plants. There is no dramatic music. There is no long farewell speech. Just illness, and then absence.
For a long time, Abraham carries that loss like a folded letter in his pocket. He rarely talks about it, but people later say when he looked sad, it felt like he was remembering something very far away. Now, Thomas Lincoln eventually remarries, a woman named Sarah, and here is one of the rare soft blessings in this story. Sarah is kind. She encourages Abraham to read. She defends his habit of staring off into space, thinking about things that other boys do not think about. She once says he is the best boy she ever saw, which for a frontier stepmother is basically a royal endorsement. And so the tall boy grows. He works, he reads, he thinks, and sometimes he tells stories. Oh yes, Abraham Lincoln had humor, dry, slow, delivered with a straight face, the kind of humor that sneaks up on you 5 seconds later. He once described himself as a piece of floating driftwood, which is both humble and slightly dramatic. But here's the quiet truth. He feels different. He does not fit neatly into the rough frontier mold. He is not aggressive. He does not enjoy fighting, though he is strong enough to win when forced. He prefers words, and words in early America are beginning to matter. Let's float gently forward. Abraham is now a young man, tall, awkward, with hair that refuses to obey gravity. He works various jobs: store clerk, postmaster, surveyor. Nothing glamorous, no glowing spotlight. But people begin to notice something. He listens carefully. He speaks clearly, and when he argues, he does so calmly. Now here's where things get quietly interesting.
He begins studying law. Not in a grand university, not with professors in wigs. He studies by borrowing books, reading them slowly, memorizing arguments. Imagine him late at night, lantern low, long legs folded awkwardly, reading legal cases like someone reading poetry. And eventually, he becomes a lawyer. Not the sharp, loud courtroom type. He is patient. He explains things. He prefers settlements over drama, which is ironic, because one day he will preside over the most dramatic conflict in American history. But we are not there yet. He marries Mary Todd, and now we gently enter emotional complexity. Mary is intelligent, ambitious, from a wealthy Kentucky family. She believes Abraham is destined for greatness. He is less certain. Their marriage is complicated. Mary has a temper, Abraham has melancholy. They argue, they reconcile. They live in a house that sometimes feels too small for both their ambitions and their anxieties. Abraham struggles with depression. In those days, it is called melancholy. He has periods where he withdraws, where his friends worry about him. He writes once that he is the most miserable man living. Now pause there. Imagine that sentence from the man who will one day hold a broken nation together. He feels deeply. He carries sadness like a quiet companion. And yet, he keeps moving. He runs for office. He loses. He runs again. He loses again. If this were modern politics, he would have retired to a podcast by now. But he continues. He believes in something. Not fame, not glory. He believes that slavery is wrong. And that belief, slowly, becomes the center of his life. Settle back in. The room is quiet again. The light is low. And somewhere in Illinois, a very tall lawyer is pacing across a wooden floor, thinking about slavery. Not loudly, not dramatically, just slowly, like a man turning a heavy stone in his hands. By the 1850s, America is restless. New states are forming. Railroads are stretching. Cities are growing. And underneath all that movement, there is a question no one can ignore. Is slavery going to spread or stop? Some politicians speak loudly about states' rights. Some speak about property. Some pretend the problem will quietly solve itself if everyone simply avoids eye contact. Abraham Lincoln does not avoid eye contact. He is not a fiery abolitionist. He does not storm into rooms shouting. Instead, he says something more unsettling. He says the country cannot survive half free and half slave, not in a screaming voice, in a calm one, which somehow makes it more powerful. Now let's float into one of the most famous political rivalries in American history, Lincoln versus Stephen Douglas. Stephen A. Douglas. Douglas is short, confident, sharp, very experienced. Lincoln is tall, awkward, sometimes rumpled. If politics had fashion awards, Lincoln would not be invited. But when they debate, something shifts. Crowds gather in open fields. Men stand on wagons to see better. Women fan themselves in the heat. Douglas argues that territories should choose for themselves whether to allow slavery. Lincoln replies that slavery is morally wrong. He does not shout. He builds his argument slowly, carefully, like stacking wood for winter. And here is the strange part. He loses the Senate race. Yes, all those speeches, all that effort, and he loses. If you're keeping score at home, Lincoln's career record is still not impressive. But something else happens. Newspapers print his words. People across the country read them. They see this tall, thoughtful man who speaks plainly. And suddenly, he is not just an Illinois lawyer. He is a national figure. Sometimes losing is just a quiet way of winning attention. History has a sense of irony like that. Now we drift into 1860. The Republican Party needs a candidate. They want someone who opposes the spread of slavery, but does not sound radical. Someone firm, but calm. Enter Abraham Lincoln. He is not the first choice, he is not the loudest voice, but he is steady, and steady feels safe. At the Republican Convention in Chicago, delegates sit in a crowded hall. Ballots are cast, names are called. Lincoln waits in Springfield. He does not attend the convention. He stays home. Imagine that. Your future possibly changing, and you are just sitting in your office. On the third ballot, he wins. Abraham Lincoln becomes the Republican nominee for president. And he still does not fully look like a president. He looks like a very tall neighbor who might help you fix a fence. But the country is about to hand him something much heavier than a fence. The election of 1860 is tense. There are 4 major candidates.
The nation is already dividing along regional lines. When the votes are counted, Lincoln wins. Not because the entire country loves him, but because the North does. And that is enough. In the South, panic begins. States fear that slavery is now threatened. South Carolina secedes, then Mississippi, Florida, Alabama, Georgia, Louisiana, Texas, like dominoes tipping in slow motion. And here's the quiet, heavy truth. Lincoln has not even taken office yet. He is president-elect, still months away from moving into the White House, and already the Union is breaking. Imagine sitting at your desk, reading letters that say entire states are leaving the country you are about to lead. That is not the kind of welcome package anyone wants. Before Lincoln travels to Washington for his inauguration, there are rumors, whispers of assassination plots, threats, warnings. He travels by train through northern cities. Crowds gather at stations. He gives short speeches from the back platform.
Perhaps already feeling the weight of what is coming. In Baltimore, security quietly changes his travel plans due to a suspected plot. He passes through the city at night, discreetly. The tall man slips into the Capitol before dawn. No parade, no cheering crowds, just tension. March 4th, 1861. The sky is overcast. Lincoln stands before the Capitol. 7 southern states have already seceded. He speaks calmly. He says he has no intention of interfering with slavery where it already exists. He pleads for unity. He asks the South to reconsider. And he ends with a line that still echoes softly. We are not enemies, but friends. It is not an angry speech. It is almost hopeful. But hope is fragile. 1 month later, Confederate forces fire on Fort Sumter. The Civil War begins. Let's slow down here. War has started, but instead of charging into battle scenes, we move quietly into the White House at night. Lincoln walks the halls. He reads casualty reports. He writes letters. He visits wounded soldiers in hospitals. He sits beside beds, tall frame bending awkwardly. He shakes hands gently. He does not speak loudly. He listens. And the war drags on. Early Union generals struggle. Battles are lost. Critics grow louder. Newspapers mock him. Cartoons exaggerate his face. They call him weak, unfit. Some call him a tyrant. He carries all of it, without theatrical outbursts, without grand speeches every week, just steady endurance. And here is the irony.
Take a slow breath. We are still in Washington. The war is still moving. The nights are still long. And Abraham Lincoln is still awake. By 1863, the war has settled into something heavy. Not dramatic, not fast, just heavy. the kind of heavy that sits in your chest and refuses to leave. Lincoln is only in his mid-50s, but photographs show a man who looks older. Lines cut deeper into his face. His eyes seem farther away. People sometimes forget how public sorrow can age someone. He reads casualty lists every day. Thousands of names. Farm boys, factory workers, immigrants who barely spoke English. Each name belongs to a mother, a wife, a child, and Lincoln reads them in silence. He once said he felt as if he were driving a team of wild horses, meaning the country, and they are not pulling in the same direction. Let's gently glide over to another ongoing frustration: generals. Lincoln appoints them. They promise action. Then they hesitate. General McClellan is cautious, very cautious. So cautious that at times it seems he is waiting for the war to politely end itself. Lincoln visits his headquarters once. McClellan keeps him waiting, then goes to bed. Yes, the President of the United States waits in a parlor while his general naps upstairs. Lincoln does not explode. He does not storm out dramatically. He simply absorbs the insult, and later he replaces him. This becomes a pattern. Lincoln searches for someone who will fight hard enough to win. Eventually, he finds Ulysses S. Grant. Grant is quiet, direct, not overly polished. He drinks sometimes. He does not care much for social approval, but he fights. And Lincoln famously says, "I cannot spare this man. He fights." There is almost humor in that. After years of hesitation, Lincoln finally has someone who moves forward, slowly, relentlessly. Now let's float to Pennsylvania, summer of 1863, the Battle of Gettysburg. It is brutal, 3 days of chaos. When it ends, the Union holds. It is not a joyful victory. It is a bloody one.
Months later, Lincoln travels to dedicate a cemetery there. The main speaker talks for 2 hours. Lincoln speaks for about 2 minutes, just a few short paragraphs. He does not shout. He does not pound the podium. He says 74 years ago. Simple words, clear rhythm. He speaks of a new birth of freedom, and then he sits down. Some newspapers criticize it. They say it is too short, not grand enough. History disagrees. Sometimes the softest voice carries the longest echo. Inside the White House, Mary Todd Lincoln is still grieving their son, Willie. She turns to spiritualism, holds seances, invites mediums. It sounds strange to modern ears,
but grief makes people reach for anything. Lincoln does not mock her. He does not publicly scold her. He simply allows space. Their marriage remains complicated, tender at times, stormy at others, but bound by shared loss. Imagine the White House at night. Heavy curtains, gas lamps flickering, footsteps in long hallways. Outside, soldiers guard the gates. Inside, a president and his wife carry private sorrow while public war rages on. Now we reach 1864. The war has dragged on for years. Casualties climb. Support for Lincoln drops. Many believe he will lose re-election. Even Lincoln thinks so. He writes a private note predicting his defeat. He folds it, seals it, as if quietly accepting fate. But then, Union victories shift momentum. Grant presses hard in Virginia. Sherman moves through Georgia. Public confidence slowly returns. Lincoln wins re-election. It is not a wild celebration. It is more like a tired sigh of relief. He tells a crowd outside the White House that he hopes for malice toward none, charity for all.
Even after years of war, even after being called names, even after carrying unimaginable pressure, he still speaks of reconciliation. There is something almost stubborn about his kindness. March 1865. The war is nearly over. Lincoln stands again at the Capitol. Rain falls. The crowd is smaller. The country is exhausted. He gives one of the most reflective speeches ever delivered by a president. He does not brag. He does not claim divine approval. Instead, he says both sides read the same Bible. Both pray to the same God. And yet the war came. He does not declare himself righteous. He speaks with humility. He ends with malice toward none, with charity for all. It is not a victory speech. It is almost a healing attempt. April 1865. Richmond falls. Confederate General Robert E. Lee surrenders to Grant at Appomattox. Robert E. Lee. The war is effectively over. Washington erupts in celebration. Bands play. Crowds cheer. Lincoln walks among them, still tall, still thoughtful. He speaks of rebuilding, of bringing Southern states back gently, not punishing them harshly. Some radical politicians disagree. They want severe consequences. Lincoln wants reunion. He believes the nation must be stitched back together carefully, like repairing torn fabric. April 14, 1865. A Friday. Lincoln spends the day meeting visitors, laughing lightly at times, telling stories. He decides to attend a play that evening at Ford's Theater. The show is a comedy, a rare moment of public relaxation. He invites friends. Mary joins him. The city feels lighter than it has in years. No heavy drum beats, no battlefield reports. Just a theater. Gas lights glowing, audience murmuring. John Wilkes Booth is in the city. John Wilkes Booth
an actor, a Confederate sympathizer. He believes killing Lincoln will revive the Southern cause. History sometimes turns on deeply misguided convictions. In the presidential box, Lincoln laughs at a joke on stage. For a brief moment, he is not carrying the Union. He is just a man enjoying a play. Booth enters quietly. A single shot, chaos. But we will not linger in violence. Lincoln is carried across the street to a boarding house. He never regains consciousness. At 7:22 a.m., April 15, 1865, he dies. Secretary of War Edwin Stanton says, "Now he belongs to the ages." And just like that, the tall, awkward boy from a log cabin becomes something larger than life. Church bells ring. Crowds gather in silence. His body travels by train across the country. Cities stop to watch. People cry openly. Some remove their hats and stand without speaking. The war has ended, but the peace feels fragile. Lincoln had planned a gentle reconstruction. Without him, the path becomes harsher, complicated, messy. History rarely stays simple. Take another slow breath. The war is over. The president is gone. But the story does not end when the heartbeat stops. In fact, it almost becomes louder. And here is the strange twist. Abraham Lincoln, who spent much of his life doubting himself, becomes something almost untouchable. A legend, a statue, a face carved into mountains. But let's not rush to the marble version. Let's stay human for a while longer. When news of his death spreads, the country feels stunned. Not chaotic, not screaming. Stunned, as if the air has been pulled slightly thinner. People gather in quiet groups. Men who once criticized him now speak softly of his patience. Newspapers that mocked his appearance now describe him as noble. It is one of history's gentler ironies. Sometimes a man must disappear before everyone agrees he mattered. His funeral train moves slowly across the country. It retraces the route he took when he first came to Washington as president-elect. Only this time, he does not wave from the back platform. He lies in a coffin draped in black cloth. Cities stop their daily rhythm. Farmers leave fields. Factory workers pause machines. Children are lifted onto shoulders just to see the train pass. They are not cheering. They are simply watching, as if trying to understand how someone so tall could feel so suddenly absent. And then something fascinating happens. The man becomes a symbol. But symbols are simplified. The awkward lawyer becomes the great emancipator. The depressed husband becomes the fearless leader. The tired president becomes the wise father of a nation. All of it true, but not complete. Because real humans are never just statues. They are contradictions. Lincoln loved humor. He told long, winding jokes that sometimes confused people before the punchline arrived. He once said if he had two faces, he would not choose to wear the one he had, which is self-deprecating and slightly tragic. He struggled with sadness his entire life. Modern historians believe he experienced clinical depression. Back then, it was just called melancholy. He wrote poems about death when he was young. He often spoke openly about feeling low. And yet, this same man carried the emotional weight of civil war. There is something quietly heroic about that. Not loud heroism, not sword-in-the-air heroism, but steady endurance. Let's drift for a moment into an ironic contrast. He is remembered as Honest Abe, and yes, he valued honesty deeply. But he was also a skilled politician.
He understood compromise. He knew when to delay, when to push, when to remain silent. He suspended habeas corpus during the war. He allowed harsh military actions. He made decisions that angered both radicals and conservatives. He was not pure marble. He was a man navigating chaos, and that makes him far more interesting, because perfection is boring. Complexity is human. Mary Todd Lincoln's life after his death becomes difficult. She is criticized heavily. Some accuse her of overspending during her White House years. Others whisper about her emotional instability. She loses more of her children. Grief follows her like a shadow. At one point, her only surviving son has her committed to an asylum, believing she is unstable. History can be unkind to women who feel too much in public. She lives many years after Abraham's death, but never quite escapes it. And so the Lincoln story becomes not just about war and freedom. It becomes about private sorrow, about the cost of leadership, about how power does not protect you from heartbreak. Now imagine the late 1800s, the country rebuilding, railroads expanding, cities rising, and somewhere in Washington, plans are drawn for a grand memorial. Years pass. Finally, in 1922, the Lincoln Memorial opens. A massive seated figure of Lincoln, calm, still, watching over the reflecting pool. Tourists stand before it. School children whisper. Politicians quote his words. He has become something close to sacred. And yet, if you look closely at the statue's face, there is sadness there. The sculptor captured it, not triumph.
His letter was brief, simple, gentle. He did not pretend her pain made sense. He did not offer grand explanations. He simply acknowledged her loss. That restraint, that humility, is part of why he lingers in memory. And now we approach the deeper reflection. If Lincoln had lost the war, how would we remember him? If the Union had fractured permanently, would he be praised or forgotten?
History often crowns the victors, but character is revealed long before victory arrives. Lincoln's greatness was visible even when the outcome was uncertain. When newspapers mocked him, when generals disappointed him, when the country seemed to unravel, he did not quit, he did not flee, he did not surrender to bitterness. And that quiet persistence may be the most remarkable thing about him. Let's lower the lights even further. Picture him not in marble, not on currency, not in textbooks. Picture him alone in his office, feet stretched awkwardly, hat resting on the desk, reading by lamplight, pausing sometimes, thinking deeply. A tall man in a quiet room, trying to do what he believes is right. He did not seek war. He did not enjoy conflict, but he accepted responsibility, and he bore it. There is something deeply human about that image, not grand, not flashy, just steady. We are nearing the final stretch now. But before we close, there is one more layer to explore. The strange way time softens even the sharpest tragedies. The Civil War was brutal, divisive, painful. Yet today, people from North and South stand together beneath Lincoln's statue. They read his words. They reflect. The nation survived its fracture. Not perfectly, not without scars, but intact. And in many ways, that survival traces back to the patience of a man who once described himself as driftwood, floating, uncertain, yet somehow steering history. Let's settle in one last time. The room is quiet. The air feels softer now. The story has stretched across years of mud roads, candlelight, battle maps, and marble halls. And at the center of it all, a very tall man who never quite believed he belonged in the spotlight. We have seen the cabin. We have walked the courtroom floors. We have stood in the White House at midnight. We have heard the echo of a single shot in a theater. Now we step back, not to summarize, but to sit with the whole shape of it. If you could stand beside Abraham Lincoln at different ages, you would meet slightly different versions of him. At 9 years old, he is quiet and grieving. At 25, he is ambitious but unsure. At 45, he is sharper, more confident, yet still carrying sadness. At 56, he is tired in a way that feels ancient. And yet, there is a thread running through all of them, a calm persistence, a refusal to give up on the idea that people can choose better. That thread matters, because leadership often looks dramatic in hindsight, but in real time it feels slow, confusing, lonely. Lincoln did not wake up one morning feeling like a legend. He woke up worried about troop movements, concerned about public opinion, wondering if he had made the wrong call. And that is strangely comforting, because it reminds us that history is shaped by people who doubt themselves. Let's drift into one of the most ironic contrasts of all. He is remembered as decisive, and yes, he was, but he was also patient to a fault. He delayed issuing the Emancipation Proclamation until he believed the timing would strengthen it. He tolerated criticism that would have shattered many leaders. He replaced generals slowly, carefully. Some called him weak, others called him cunning. Perhaps he was simply cautious. He understood that once you move a nation, you cannot easily move it back. There is something almost philosophical about him. He did not chase applause, he chased outcomes, and outcomes take time. Now imagine a late evening in early 1865.
He once visited Richmond after it fell, the former Confederate capital. He walked its streets quietly. Freed people gathered around him. Some knelt. He gently told them not to kneel to him. Think about that moment. A man with enormous power asking others to stand. It is a small detail, but it speaks loudly. There is also the strange reality that Lincoln never saw the full results of his work. The 13th Amendment, which formally abolished slavery, passed Congress in early 1865. He celebrated its passage, but he did not live to see it ratified by the states later that year. He planted seeds, others watched them grow. History often works that way. The planter does not always see the harvest. Now let's touch something a little deeper. Lincoln believed deeply in democracy, not as a slogan, but as an experiment. He once described the United States as a government of the people, by the people, for the people. That phrase has been repeated so often it almost feels ordinary, but at the time it was fragile. If the Union had dissolved, the experiment might have ended. Other nations were watching. Some expected the United States to fail, to fracture permanently. Lincoln understood that this war was not just about territory. It was about proving that a divided republic could survive internal conflict. That is a heavy idea to carry, especially when you are already prone to melancholy. Let's float into one final quiet image. The Lincoln Memorial at night. The city mostly asleep. Tourists gone. Only soft light illuminating the seated figure. Lincoln Memorial. He sits in stone, hands resting, gaze forward. From certain angles, his face looks stern. From others, almost gentle. And if you look long enough, you might notice that the sculptor gave him slightly uneven expressions. One hand clenched, one hand relaxed. Strength and mercy, power and patience. That duality is the entire story. It would be easy to turn him into something perfect, but perfection is not what carried the nation. It was resilience. It was humor during dark weeks. It was the ability to tell a joke even while reading grim casualty numbers. He once said that if he did not laugh, he would die. There is truth in that. Humor was not decoration. It was survival. And maybe that is one of the quiet lessons he leaves behind. Not that you must be flawless, not that you must be fearless, but that you must continue, even when tired, even when criticized, even when unsure. Now let's gently widen the frame. The Civil War ended. Reconstruction began. It became complicated, messy, full of political fights Lincoln never saw. Some argue that had he lived, Reconstruction would have been smoother.
Others believed the forces at play were too strong for any one man. We cannot know. History does not offer alternate endings. It gives us only what happened. But what did happen is remarkable enough. A boy born in a cabin without wealth or status rose to lead a fractured nation. He did not inherit power. He built credibility slowly, with words, with patience, with thought. In an age of loud men, he often chose quiet clarity, and quiet clarity changed the course of a country. There is one last irony worth whispering before we let him rest. He spent much of his youth feeling insignificant. He feared he would never accomplish anything meaningful. He worried his life would pass unnoticed. And yet, more than a century later, children learn his name before they fully understand what a president is.
His face rests on currency. His speeches are memorized. His memory is protected in stone. The man who doubted himself became one of the most recognized figures in history. There is something deeply poetic about that. So now, as the story gently closes, picture the cabin again, the small fire, the tall boy reading by flickering light. He does not know about debates. He does not know about Gettysburg. He does not know about marble monuments. He is just curious, quiet, thoughtful. And that is where all of it begins, not with power, not with destiny, but with a boy who loved books and believed fairness mattered. And somehow that was enough. The room is still. The lantern fades. The tall shadow finally rests. If you carry anything from this long walk through his life, let it be this. History is not only shaped by loud certainty. Sometimes it is shaped by gentle persistence, by steady thought, by a man who once felt like driftwood and still chose to steer. Good night. Let the story settle, and let the silence be soft.